The village of Mist Hollow had never seen a moon festival so bitter. Lanterns swayed from crooked posts along the muddy main street, their feeble glow struggling against the heavy snowfall that had begun at dusk. Villagers huddled around bonfires, passing flasks of mulled wine and singing old songs to honor the winter moon. It was a small celebration compared to the grand affairs of the capital, but for a forgotten settlement at the edge of the frozen north, it was enough. No one noticed the healer woman stumbling through the shadows at the edge of the gathering. Aelith pressed her hand against a wooden fence post, fighting to keep her legs beneath her. The world swam in and out of focus. Her breath came in shallow gasps that crystallized in the frigid air, and somewhere deep in her chest, a wrongness pulsed with every heartbeat. 3 months. She had survived 3 months since fleeing the Obsidian Keep, building a new identity in this place where no one asked questions. She had delivered babies and treated fevers and pretended that her heart was not shattered beyond repair. But tonight, her body had finally betrayed her. She had not eaten properly in days. The nausea that plagued her mornings had spread to consume every waking hour, and the child growing in her womb seemed to drain what little strength remained. The claiming mark on her hip burned constantly now, a searing reminder of the man who had promised her forever, and then chosen another, his child. Growing inside her while he celebrated his engagement to a noblewoman 3 kingdoms away. Aelith's vision blurred. She needed to reach her cottage, just a few more steps past the festival gathering, and she could collapse in private. Could let the grief and exhaustion consume her, where no one would witness her weakness. She pushed off the fence and immediately knew it was a mistake. The ground tilted. Her knees buckled. The snow rushed up to embrace her, and Aelith felt the cold seep through her thin dress as she crumpled at the base of the ancient oak that marked the village boundary. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the moon, full and merciless, watching her fall. She did not see the shapes emerging from the tree line. She did not see the massive black wolf that burst from the forest, scattering villagers in its wake. And she did not hear the howl of anguish that split the winter sky as the Alpha King of Virenth finally found the mate he had torn his kingdom apart searching for. Kalen shifted mid-stride, his human form hitting the snow on his knees as he gathered her limp body against his chest. His hands shook as he brushed frost-covered hair from her face, revealing features that had haunted his every waking moment for 3 months. Aelith. Her name tore from his throat. Aelith, open your eyes, please. She was so cold, so pale. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint that sent ice flooding through his veins. Behind him, his wolves formed a protective circle around their king, and the woman he cradled like something infinitely precious. The villagers had frozen in place, their festival songs dying on their lips as they stared at the scene unfolding before them. The fearsome Alpha King, weeping over a healer woman they had known only as a quiet widow. Kalen pressed his palm to her cheek, then her forehead, then her throat where her pulse fluttered weak and thready beneath his fingers. His wolf howled inside him, clawing for release, desperate to protect what was his. Because she was his mate, his heart. The woman he had claimed in secret 4 months ago beneath the harvest moon, when he had pressed his teeth to the soft flesh of her hip and felt their souls bind together in a way that should have been unbreakable. His hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly, and he felt it. The flutter of life beneath his palm. Faint. Fragile, but unmistakably present. Kalen stopped breathing. No, he whispered, his voice cracking. No, no, no. She was pregnant. His mate was pregnant with his child, and she had been suffering alone for months while he searched every corner of the realm, never knowing that she carried his heir in her womb. Around him, his wolves shifted uneasily. They could sense their alpha's distress radiating outward in waves that made even the strongest warriors lower their heads in submission. They did not understand the full truth yet, but they could feel that something profound had shifted. Stellan, his first beta, pushed through the circle. His weathered face paled as he took in the scene. "My king," he said carefully, "is this my mate?" The words emerged like broken glass. "She carries my child, and someone has been hurting her." Kaylin's hand had found the mark on her hip, visible through the thin fabric of her dress where it had ridden up in her fall. The claiming bite that should have been silver and healed had darkened to an angry red, the skin around it veined with unnatural gray. Poison. Someone had been poisoning his mate, the same poison that had been used on him the night of the announcement. Understanding crashed through Kaylin with the force of a winter storm. The Silverbanes. They had not only drugged him into compliance, they had been slowly killing the woman who stood between their daughter and the throne, and he had led them straight to her. A howl rose from somewhere in the forest, not one of his wolves. Something darker, hungrier. "Assassins!" Stellan growled, his body already shifting into battle stance. "They followed us." Kaelin rose with Aelith cradled against his chest, his wolf surging toward the surface. The gold of his eyes blazed in the lantern light. "Protect her," he commanded. "Kill anything that comes within 10 feet." He carried his unconscious mate toward the nearest cottage as his wolves formed a defensive line against the shadows emerging from the trees. The battle for Mist Hollow had begun, but as Kaelin laid Aelith gently on a stranger's bed, as he pressed his lips to her frozen forehead and felt the faint pulse of their bond still fighting to survive, only one thought consumed him. How had they come to this? How had a love that burned so bright led to such devastating darkness? The answer lay 3 months in the past, in a castle far from this frozen village, where a servant girl and a king had dared to defy fate itself. 4 months earlier, Aelith had served in the Obsidian Keep for 3 years before the Alpha King noticed her. She had scrubbed floors and folded linens and carried trays through endless corridors, invisible in the way that servants were meant to be. The nobles looked through her, the guards paid her no mind, and the Alpha King, with his crown of black thorns and eyes like molten honey, existed in a world so far above hers that she might as well have been gazing at the sun. Until the night of the harvest gathering, she had been clearing dishes from a private terrace when he found her. The feast had ended hours ago, but Aelith had lingered, stealing a moment to watch the harvest moon rise over the distant mountains. She had not heard him approach, had not sensed his presence until his voice emerged from the shadows. "You are the one who hums while she works." Aelith spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Alpha King stood barely 3 feet away, his ceremonial armor abandoned, his dark hair tousled by the wind, his expression strangely open in the silver moonlight. "My king." She dropped into a curtsy, nearly overturning her tray. "Forgive me. I did not mean to disturb." "You did not disturb me." He stepped closer, and Aelith forgot how to breathe. "I have heard you these past weeks, humming that melody in the gardens, in the corridors. It is familiar somehow." "It was my mother's song," she whispered. "A lullaby from the eastern villages." Something flickered across his features. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. "My mother sang the same melody," he said quietly, "before she died." Aelith did not know what to say. The Alpha King never spoke of his mother. Everyone knew the old queen had been poisoned when Kaelin was barely 12 years old, murdered by rivals who sought to destabilize the throne. He had buried that grief so deep that most believed he had forgotten it entirely. Yet here he stood, sharing it with a servant girl he had never addressed before. "I am sorry," Aelith said softly, "for your loss." He studied her face as if searching for something hidden beneath the surface. "What is your name?" "Aelith, my king." "Aelith." He spoke her name like a question, like a discovery. "Will you walk with me?" She should have refused, should have remembered her place, made her excuses, returned to the kitchens where she belonged. A maid did not walk with kings. A nobody did not capture the attention of the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms. But when he extended his hand, she took it. That first walk became 2, then 5, then a dozen. Kaelin began finding her in quiet corners of the castle, stealing moments between council meetings and diplomatic audiences. They spoke of small things at first, then deeper ones. He told her about the weight of the crown, the loneliness of power, and the impossible expectations that pressed against him from every direction. She told him about her village, destroyed by rogues when she was 7, about the years of wandering before she found work at the keep, about the dreams she still carried, of a home and a family she thought she would never have. With each conversation, something grew between them, something dangerous and undeniable. The first kiss came on the autumn equinox, beneath the great oak in the eastern garden. Kaelin had pulled her into the shadows when footsteps approached, pressing her against the ancient trunk with his body shielding hers. When the danger passed, neither of them moved. His forehead rested against hers. His breath mingled with her breath. "I should not want you this desperately," he murmured. "You deserve better than a king who can offer you nothing but secrets." "And yet," she whispered, "and yet I cannot stay away." His lips found hers, and Aelith felt something inside her shift into place, like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. The claiming came 3 weeks later. Kaelin led her to a clearing deep in the forest, far from the castle walls and prying eyes. The moon hung heavy and golden above them, and when he pressed his teeth to her hip, when she felt the bond surge through her blood like liquid fire, Aelith understood that she belonged to him completely. "Mine," he growled against her skin. "My mate. My heart. Nothing will change this." "But the council," she gasped. "They will never accept—" "I do not need their acceptance." He rose to cup her face in his hands, his burnished gaze blazing with conviction. "I need only time. Let me handle the politics, secure the alliances, and then I will announce you to the world. You will be my queen, Aelith. I swear it." She had believed him. For 5 beautiful weeks, she had lived inside that belief like a prayer, had endured the hidden meetings and the whispered promises, and the ache of watching him move through public life as if she did not exist, had trusted that the bond between them was stronger than politics, stronger than tradition, stronger than anything. Until the morning the council delegation arrived from the northern territories, until the evening she heard Nephira Silverbane's name announced as a candidate for queen, until the night she hid in the gallery above the throne room and watched the Alpha King take another woman's hand and speak the words that shattered her world. "I accept the alliance," Kaelin's voice echoed through the chamber, flat and strange. "Lady Nephira of House Silverbane will be my bride." In the shadows above, Aelith felt the claiming mark on her hip burn as if his teeth had pierced her flesh anew. She did not see the emptiness in his eyes. She did not notice the mechanical stiffness of his movements. She only saw betrayal. And so, she ran. Aelith woke to warmth and the scent of pine smoke. For a moment she did not know where she was. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, rough wooden beams instead of the thatched roof of her cottage. Firelight flickered against the walls. And somewhere nearby, someone was arguing in hushed, urgent tones. "Cannot move her yet. She nearly died in that snow. The assassins will not wait for her to recover. We need to— What we need is for you to let me work, Your Majesty, or I will have your wolves drag you outside regardless of your crown." Aelith knew that voice. Brina, the old woman who had appointed herself Aelith's guardian in Mist Hollow. Which meant the other voice belonged to— She turned her head, and her breath caught. Kaelin sat beside the bed, his massive frame folded into a chair far too small for him. Dark circles carved the skin beneath his eyes. His cheeks were hollow, his jaw shadowed with days of unshaved stubble. He looked like a man who had not slept in months, Because he had not, she realized. The bond pulsed between them, weaker than it should have been but still present, and through it she could feel echoes of his exhaustion, his desperation, his overwhelming relief. "You are awake." His voice emerged rough, as if he had forgotten how to use it. Aelith's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby kicked against her palm, strong and insistent, and she released a shaky breath. "The child is well," Kaelin said quietly. "Brina examined you while you slept. You are both malnourished and weak, but alive." His jaw tightened. "You would not have survived another week." "How did you find me?" "I never stopped searching." He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly as if to keep himself from reaching for her. 3 months, Aelith. I have torn apart every village, every forest, and every corner of the realm. The bond led me here, eventually. I could feel you, faint but present, pulling me north. You felt me." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. "The way you felt me the night you chose Nephira?" Kaelin flinched as if she had struck him. "I did not choose her." His voice cracked on the words. "I would never. Aelith, I was drugged. Poisoned. I have no memory of that night beyond accepting a cup of wine from Lord Silverbane." The claim was so outrageous that Aelith almost laughed. "Drugged," she repeated flatly. "How convenient." "It is the truth." Kaelin's hands clenched until his knuckles whitened. "A compound derived from moonsbane and other herbs our healers still cannot fully identify. It severed my connection to my wolf, suppressed the bond, and made me a puppet. I stood before the court and spoke words I have no memory of speaking. And you expect me to believe the Silverbanes have been poisoning you as well?" Aelith's protest died in her throat. Kaelin rose and moved to the bedside, kneeling so their eyes were level. "The mark on your hip. Brina showed me. The discoloration, the gray veins. It is the same compound they used on me, administered in smaller doses over time. They have been trying to kill you slowly, to sever the bond permanently before anyone discovered the truth." Aelith's hand moved to her hip, feeling the tender skin where the claiming mark still burned. "How is that possible?" she whispered. "I have been in hiding. No one here knew who I was." "Someone did." Kaelin's expression hardened. "We found evidence that the Silverbanes have had agents in every major settlement for months. They knew where you were before I did. They were simply waiting for the right moment." The right moment. To kill her and the baby she carried. To eliminate every obstacle between Nephira and the throne. "The assassins in the forest," Aelith breathed. "Silverbane soldiers. They followed my wolves here, hoping to finish what the poison could not." Kaelin's hand hovered over her cheek, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "My wolves are holding them back, but there are more coming. We cannot stay here." Aelith wanted to pull away, wanted to cling to the anger that had sustained her through 3 months of exile. But the bond pulsed between them, flooding her with emotions that were not her own. Anguish, guilt, and beneath it all, a love so vast it threatened to drown her. "You truly remember nothing?" she asked quietly. "Only waking 2 days later to find Stellan shouting that you had vanished." Kaelin's voice broke. "I ran to your chamber. Your things were gone. No note, no explanation, only the fading scent of your tears on the pillow where you had wept." Aelith felt her walls begin to crack. "I thought you had thrown me away," she confessed. "I thought everything we shared was a lie." "Never." He finally let his hand touch her face, his calloused palm impossibly gentle against her cheek. "You are my mate. My true mate. I would burn this kingdom to ashes before I let anyone take you from me." A crash from outside shattered the moment. Stellan burst through the cottage door, his face grim. "My king! The assassins have regrouped. They are pushing through our lines." Kaelin rose, his wolf surging visibly beneath his skin. "How many?" 3 dozen at least, and they have archers with poisoned bolts." Through the window, Aelith could see the flash of steel and hear the snarls of battling wolves. Kaelin's warriors were fighting desperately, but they were outnumbered. And she was the reason they were dying. Aelith pushed herself upright despite the dizziness that threatened to drag her back down. "You need to rest," Kaelin commanded, but his attention was already split between her and the battle raging outside. "Your wolves are dying because of me." She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, gripping the wooden frame until her knuckles whitened. "I will not hide while others pay for my survival. You are pregnant and barely recovered from... I am not helpless." Something in her voice made him pause. Through the bond, she felt his wolf respond to the steel beneath her words, not with dominance, but with recognition. She was his equal, his mate, and she would not cower while their people bled. A howl of pain erupted from somewhere close. Kaelin cursed and moved toward the door. "Stay inside, please." Then he was gone, his body exploding into wolf form as he launched himself into the chaos. Aelith stumbled to the window, clutching the frame for support. The village of Mist Hollow had become a battlefield. Black-clad assassins swarmed through the streets, their silver blades catching the firelight. Kaelin's wolves fought with desperate courage, but for every assassin that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. She watched Kaelin tear through a cluster of attackers, his massive black form moving with lethal grace. But even he could not be everywhere at once. To her left, one of his wolves collapsed with an arrow protruding from its flank. To her right, another was being driven back by 3 assassins working in coordinated formation. They were losing. Something stirred in Aelith's chest. A warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. She pressed her hand to her belly, and the baby responded with a kick so strong it stole her breath. The warmth spread through her limbs, flowing into her fingers, building behind her eyes. Brina appeared at her elbow, her weathered face tight with concern. "Child, your hands..." Aelith looked down and gasped. Golden light emanated from her palms, soft and pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The same light that had sometimes flickered when she healed the sick. The gift her mother had warned her to hide, the legacy of a bloodline that was supposed to have died generations ago. But this was different. Stronger. As if the child growing inside her had awakened something that had always slumbered in her blood. Through the window, she saw an archer take aim at Kaelin's exposed back. She did not think. She simply moved. The cottage door burst open beneath her glowing hands, and Aelith stepped into the heart of battle. She raised her arms, and the golden light exploded outward in a wave that swept across the village square. Assassins screamed as the radiance touched them, their bodies thrown backward like leaves in a hurricane. Those closest to her simply crumpled, overwhelmed by power they could not comprehend. The wolves it passed over remained unharmed, more than unharmed, wounds closed, broken bones knitted together, exhaustion lifted like fog beneath morning sun. Aelith had healed an entire battlefield with a single pulse of power. For a moment, silence fell over Mist Hollow. Then the remaining assassins fled into the forest, their formation shattered, their confidence broken by the impossible light that had erupted from a pregnant woman in a threadbare dress. Kaelin shifted back to human form, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with shock, as he turned to stare at her. "Aelith," he breathed. "What?" An arrow sang through the air. She saw it too late. A lone archer at the tree line, one who had held position while his companions fled. The silver-tipped bolt flew straight toward her heart, and her depleted power could not rise fast enough to stop it. Kaelin moved faster than thought. His body collided with hers, taking them both to the ground as the arrow hissed past, close enough to slice a line of fire across his shoulder. They landed hard in the trampled snow, his weight pressing her into the frozen earth, his arms wrapped around her with desperate protectiveness. For a moment, neither moved. Then Kaelin pulled back just enough to look at her face, his wolf-bright eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her soul ache. "Are you hurt?" His voice was ragged, barely human. "The baby. We are fine." Her hand found his face, her fingers tracing the hard line of his jaw. "You are bleeding." "I do not care." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. 3 months, Aelith. 3 months of nightmares where I watched you fall and could not reach you. I thought the dreams were punishment. I did not know you were actually... I felt you too. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Every night, reaching for me through the bond. I thought it was my imagination. Wishful thinking. It was real. His hand slid to her belly, pressing gently against the curve where his child grew. "This is real. We are real. And I will never let anyone separate us again." The baby kicked against his palm, and something cracked open in Kaylin's expression. Awe, wonder, and a fierce, protective love that radiated through the bond with overwhelming force. Stellan's voice cut through the moment. "My king, we need to move. There will be more assassins, and we cannot defend this position." Kaylin helped Aelith to her feet, keeping one arm wrapped securely around her waist. "Where do we go?" she asked. His jaw hardened. "Home. To the Obsidian Keep." "But the Silverbanes have made their move." His expression turned to stone. "And now they will learn the consequences of threatening my mate and my child." They traveled through the night and into the following day, Kaylin's remaining wolves forming a protective ring around their king and his mate. Aelith rode before him on his great black warhorse, her back pressed against his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. She had protested at first, arguing that she could ride alone, but Kaylin had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. "My wolf needs you close," he had said, his voice rough. 3 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of reach until every threat to your safety has been eliminated." So Aelith had relented, leaning into his warmth and feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The baby seemed to approve of the arrangement, settling into peaceful stillness for the first time in weeks. As they rode, they talked. Not about politics or strategy or the dangers that awaited them. They talked about the things they should have said months ago, before poison and lies had torn them apart. Kaylin told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Nephira in his chambers, her hands on his chest, her lips curved in triumphant satisfaction. About the horror that had flooded through him when he realized what had been done. About throwing her across the room and demanding answers that no one could give. "They told me you had left willingly," he said, his voice hollow. "That you had taken gold from the Silverbanes in exchange for disappearing quietly. I did not believe it, but I had no proof. Only the bond, screaming in my chest, telling me something was wrong." "I would never take their gold," Aelith whispered. "I know. I knew then too. But I had no idea where to search, and every day the bond grew fainter. I thought..." His arm tightened around her. "I thought you were dying. That somewhere out there, you were slipping away from me and I could not stop it. The poison." She pressed her hand over his where it rested on her belly. "It was weakening the bond. And nearly killing you in the process." His voice hardened to steel. "The Silverbanes will pay for every moment of suffering they caused you. I swear it." Aelith was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you not simply accept the marriage?" she finally asked. "It would have been easier. Nephira is beautiful, powerful, and politically advantageous. The council would have celebrated." "Because she is not you." Kaylin pressed his lips to her hair. "The bond chose you, Aelith. Before I even knew your name, my wolf recognized you as ours. Do you think I could simply set that aside? Accept a pale imitation when I had already tasted what true connection feels like? I am a servant, a nobody. You are the woman who makes me feel like more than a crown and a title, the woman who sees Kaylin, not just the Alpha King." He turned her face toward his, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "You are my mate, my equal. And when this is over, you will be my queen. Not because of politics, but because there is no other future I am willing to accept." Aelith felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I thought you had abandoned me," she confessed. "I carried your child alone for 3 months, convinced that everything we shared was a lie, that I was foolish enough to believe a king could love someone like me." "I do love you," he said it simply, without hesitation. "I loved you when I thought you had left me. I loved you through 3 months of madness and despair, and I will love you until my last breath, regardless of what crown sits on my head or what enemies try to tear us apart." She kissed him then, twisting in the saddle to press her mouth to his. The bond roared to life between them. His emotions crashed into hers with overwhelming force. Love, desperate and consuming. Desire, barely held in check. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had shifted to molten gold. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough with restrained need. "When you are safe, when our enemies are destroyed, I will complete the bond properly, and you will never doubt my devotion again." A rider appeared from the south, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Kaelin's scouts, his face ashen with urgency. "My king," he gasped. "News from the capital." Kaelin's expression hardened. "Speak." "The Silverbanes struck the night after you left for the north. They had allies within the guard, traitors who opened the gates. Lord Silverbane has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone mad and abandoned your throne." Aelith felt the blood drain from her face. "And the servants?" Kaelin demanded. "The guards who remained loyal?" The scout hesitated. "Taken hostage, my king. 43 in total. Lord Silverbane has announced their execution at the next full moon unless you surrender yourself and—" He glanced at Aelith. "And the woman who bewitched you." The full moon was in 3 days. Through the bond, Aelith felt Kaelin's rage building like a storm about to break. His wolf howled for blood, for vengeance, for the destruction of everyone who had dared to threaten his mate and his people. "My king," the scout continued, his voice dropping. "Lady Nephira stands at Silverbane's side. She has been named queen in your absence." Nephira, who was supposed to have been confined pending investigation, who had somehow escaped and returned to her father's side. There had been a traitor all along, someone close enough to facilitate her release. "We ride for the Obsidian Keep," Kaelin announced, his voice carrying across the assembled wolves. "No rest until we reach the capital." Aelith gripped his arm. 43 hostages, Kaelin. If we attack directly, we will not attack directly." His jaw clenched with barely contained fury. "But we will not abandon our people either. There is another way into the keep, one the Silverbanes do not know about." His wolves howled their readiness, and the company surged forward with renewed purpose. The Obsidian Keep awaited, and with it, a reckoning long overdue. The Obsidian Keep rose against the evening sky like a monument to stolen power. The great banner of the royal house had been torn down, replaced by the silver serpent of House Silverbane. Smoke rose from several quarters of the surrounding city. Even from this distance, Aelith could hear the distant sounds of suffering, screams, clashing steel, the chaos of a kingdom in upheaval. "He has not simply declared himself regent," Kaelin said, his voice flat with barely contained fury. "He is purging anyone who might oppose him." They had left the bulk of his wolves hidden in the forest, bringing only a handful of his most trusted warriors. The servants' passage Kaelin had mentioned was exactly where he promised, a narrow gap in the eastern wall, hidden behind centuries of overgrown ivy. One by one, they slipped through into the musty darkness of a forgotten corridor. The great hall was not far. Even from here, Aelith could hear Lord Silverbane's voice echoing through the stone passages, addressing some assembly she could not see. The traitors will face justice at moonrise, Silverbane was saying. Let this be a lesson to all who would defy the natural order. The Mad King chose a servant over his duty, and now his people pay the price. Kaelin's hand found Aelith's in the darkness, his grip almost painfully tight. They crept forward until they reached a servant's alcove that overlooked the great hall. What Aelith saw through the narrow opening made her stomach lurch. 43 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound, their faces bruised and bloodied. Armed Silverbane soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the throne, Kaelin's throne, sat Lord Darius Silverbane, his silver hair gleaming like a crown. Beside him stood Nephira, dressed in royal finery, a stolen circlet resting on her golden hair. "We cannot fight through that many guards," Stellan murmured. "Not without the hostages dying first." He was right. The Silverbane soldiers had positioned themselves perfectly, blades at the throats of the prisoners. Any direct assault would trigger a massacre. "There is another way," Aelith said quietly. Kaelin turned, his expression sharpening. "No. They want me. I am the obstacle to everything they have planned." She met his gaze steadily. "If I walk in there alone, if I offer myself in exchange for the hostages, absolutely not. Listen to me. Silverbane wants a public victory. He wants to execute the woman who enchanted his king in front of witnesses. If I give him that opportunity, he will release the hostages to prove his magnanimity." She touched his face gently. "And while every eye is fixed on me, you and your wolves can position yourselves. He will kill you the moment you are within reach. Then do not let him." She rose on her toes to press a kiss to his rigid jaw. "You found me across 3 kingdoms, through poison and lies, and months of separation. You can protect me across a single hall. Aelith, trust me," she whispered. "Trust us." She pressed his hand to her belly, where the baby kicked against his palm as if in agreement. Something broke behind Kaelin's eyes. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers with desperate intensity. "If anything happens to you," he breathed, "I will burn this kingdom to the ground." "I know." She kissed him once more, brief and fierce. "That is why nothing will happen." Before he could stop her, she slipped through the alcove entrance and walked into the great hall. Silence fell like a blade. Every eye turned toward the pregnant woman in a travel-stained dress who strode down the center aisle as if she owned the stones beneath her feet. Lord Silverbane rose from the stolen throne, his cold eyes widening before narrowing with satisfied malice. "Well, the servant girl arrives at last." "Lord Silverbane?" Aelith's voice carried across the hall, steady despite the terror coursing through her blood. "I have come to offer an exchange. My life for theirs." She gestured toward the kneeling hostages. Among them, she recognized faces: the cook who had made her favorite sweet bread, the stable boy who had always smiled at her, the elderly housekeeper who had shown her kindness when she first arrived at the keep. "Release them," she continued, "and I will submit to whatever justice you see fit." "Justice!" Silverbane descended from the dais, drawing a blade that gleamed with unnatural silver coating. "You speak of justice? You, who bewitched our king with common blood and hedge magic? Who sought to place your bastard on the throne?" "I sought nothing but to love him." Aelith held her ground as he approached. "Your daughter is the one who poisoned her way onto a throne she did not earn." Nephira's face contorted with rage. "Father, kill her now. We do not need this spectacle." "Patience, daughter." Silverbane smiled, cold and serpentine. "The people need to see what happens to those who reach above their station." He waved a dismissive hand toward the hostages. "Release them. Let them witness the consequences of their misplaced loyalty." Guards moved to cut the prisoners' bonds. Aelith watched them stumble toward the doors, relief and horror warring on their faces. Stellan was among the last to rise, his eyes finding hers with a look of desperate gratitude before he was pushed toward the exit with the others. Then the great hall doors slammed shut, and Aelith stood alone before the serpent and his venomous daughter. "Now," Silverbane raised his poisoned blade, "let us discuss your crimes." "There is only one crime here," Aelith said quietly, "and you are the one who committed it." Silverbane's smile flickered. Bold words for a woman about to die. "I am not going to die." She felt the power stirring in her chest, awakened by the baby's presence, strengthened by the bond that pulsed with Kaelin's approaching fury. "Not today. Not by your hand." He lunged. The blade descended toward her heart, and golden light erupted from Aelith's body like a second sun. Silverbane staggered backward, his arm frozen mid-strike, his face contorting with shock and pain. The power that flowed from her was unlike anything she had summoned before. Not just healing, but something older, something primal. The legacy of her bloodline fully awakened by the child who carried both her gift and Kaelin's wolf. "What?" Silverbane gasped. "What are you?" "I am the daughter of the Luminari," Aelith said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that shook the ancient stones. "The last of a line your ancestors tried to exterminate, and I am done hiding." The great hall doors exploded inward. Kaelin burst through in full wolf form, his black fur bristling, his eyes blazing gold. Behind him poured his wolves, a tide of fang and claw that crashed against the Silverbane guards like a wave against sand. But Aelith no longer needed saving. She had already begun to save herself. The transformation took her by surprise. One moment, Aelith stood wreathed in golden light, holding Silverbane at bay through sheer force of awakened power. The next, agony ripped through her body as bones shifted and muscles reformed. She had never shifted before, had never felt the wolf that slumbered in the blood of all who bore the mate mark of an alpha. But the baby's power had awakened more than her luminary heritage. It had unlocked the gift that Kaelin's claiming bite had planted in her flesh 4 months ago. Golden fur sprouted across her skin, her spine curved, her jaw elongated. And when the light finally faded, a wolf stood where a woman had been. She was smaller than Kaelin's massive form, but no less magnificent. Her fur shimmered like captured starlight. Her eyes burned with amber fire, and the claiming mark on her hip now blazed as a silver pattern in her coat. She was no longer just a healer. She was a wolf, a queen, a force that would not be denied. Silverbane scrambled backward, his poisoned blade forgotten on the floor. "Impossible," he breathed. The Luminari could not shift. They were healers, not... Aelith lunged. Her jaws closed around his sword arm with savage precision. The Lord screamed as bones crunched beneath her teeth. She shook him once, twice, then flung him aside like a broken doll. Across the hall, Nephira shrieked and fled toward a servant's exit. She made it 3 steps. Aelith's wolf form moved with impossible speed, cutting off the escape route. Nephira stumbled backward, her beautiful face twisted with terror, her hands raised in futile defense. "Please," she whimpered. "Please, I was only doing what my father—" Aelith shifted back to human form, standing over her fallen enemy with golden light still crackling across her skin. "Your father poisoned my mate, tried to destroy my bond, sent assassins to murder me and my child." Her voice was ice given sound. "But you, Nephira, you smiled while you did it. You wore a stolen crown and called yourself queen while 43 innocent people waited to die. I will give you anything. I will confess everything. You will face justice." Aelith stepped back as Kaelin's wolves surrounded the cowering woman. "Real justice. From the kingdom you tried to destroy." She turned to find Kaelin standing in human form behind her, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on her with an expression of pure awe. "You shifted," he whispered. "Our child helped." She pressed a hand to her belly, where the baby had finally stilled, its power spent but its purpose fulfilled. "I think they wanted to protect their mother." Kaelin made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms with desperate tenderness. "I thought I lost you again," he murmured against her hair. "When you walked through those doors alone, you found me?" She pulled back to cup his face, her thumbs tracing the sharp lines of his cheekbones. "You will always find me." Around them, the battle had ended. The Silverbane guards had surrendered, their weapons cast aside, their defiance broken by the impossible sight of a servant girl transforming into a wolf of pure light. Lord Silverbane lay moaning on the stones, his mangled arm cradled against his chest. Nephira knelt in a circle of snarling wolves, her stolen crown lying forgotten on the blood-spattered floor. Stellan approached, his weathered face split in a rare smile. "My king, my queen, the keep is secured." "My queen." The title settled over Aelith like a mantle she had not known she was meant to wear. Kaelin took her hand and led her toward the dais, toward the throne that had been stolen and was now reclaimed. But instead of ascending alone, he turned to face her, dropping to his knees before the assembled witnesses. "Aelith of the Luminari," he said, his voice ringing across the hall. "You have saved my people. You have faced my enemies without flinching. You carry my heir and hold my heart in your hands." He tilted his head, baring his throat in the ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. "Claim me," he said. "Complete what we began. Let every wolf in this kingdom know that you are my equal, my partner, my queen." Aelith understood what he was asking. She leaned down, pressing her lips to the place where his pulse thundered beneath his skin. Then, with the certainty of fate itself, she let her teeth sink into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. Not pain, completion. She felt his soul pour into hers, felt every memory, every emotion, every desperate moment of the past months merge with her own experience. She saw herself through his eyes, not a servant, but a queen. Not a nobody, but the most precious soul in his existence. And he saw himself through hers, a king who had fought against impossible odds, a mate worthy of every sacrifice. When she released him, they were both weeping. "My queen," Kaelin whispered. "My king," she answered. The wolves of Virenth lifted their voices in celebration, their howls shaking the ancient stones of the obsidian keep. Epilogue, 3 months later. The kingdom had never seen such joy. Lord Silverbane had been executed for his crimes, his house dissolved, his name struck from every record. Nephira had been exiled to the frozen wastes beyond the northern mountains, stripped of her title and her wolf, condemned to live as the nothing she had once called Aelith. And on a warm spring morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of the royal chambers, Aelith brought 2 lives into the world. A boy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's golden gift. A girl, with fur like starlight when she shifted and eyes that already gleamed with amber fire. Kaelin held his children with reverent hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked between them and the woman who had given him everything. "Thank you," he whispered, "for fighting, for believing, for finding your way back to me." Aelith smiled, exhausted but radiant. "We found our way to each other," she corrected softly, "through poison and lies and impossible odds, and we will face whatever comes next the same way. Together," Kaelin promised, "always." Outside their window, the wolves of Virenth lifted their voices in celebration, a song that carried across mountains and valleys, reaching every corner of the realm. The Alpha King had found his true mate, and nothing would ever tear them apart again.